everyone, and thank you for joining this information session. My name is Tatiana Rabeva, and I'm the Assistant Director for the Postgraduate Specialisation programs at the College of Law. I'm joined today by Stuart McCarroll, our Student Liaison Officer. During this session, we will go through and answer some of your frequently asked questions and look at the structure of our master's programs. We'll look at what the study looks like, what are possible recognition of prior learning options available, and we'll also cover some information about the industry partners. I'll now turn over to Stuart to go through the frequently asked questions.
Thank you, Tatiana. Hi, everyone. So I'm Stuart. I'm the Student Liaison for the Applied Law programs. So graduate diploma, graduate certificate, and the Masters, of course. I guess one of the first top questions is how is the College of Law postgraduate program structured? So I think, well, the graduate diploma typically has 4 subjects, where a Masters has 8 subjects. You'll have 4 intakes a year, so typically that's 1 to 2 years worth of coursework. But you can take your subjects in any order, with the capstone subject often taken last. There's 4 intakes a year, so you can start any time, and like I said, you can do the subjects in any order, but you have a longer time than that time period to finish it, so you can take a break of 1, 2, 3, or 4 intakes up to 12 months, with the Masters having 5 years to get it completed. Tatiana will elaborate on this a little bit further, but there are weekly conferences, which are not compulsory to attend, but they're a great opportunity to learn, ask questions, and interact with your lecturer and, of course, your classmates. The web conferences involve group discussion about issues or the topics arising from the readings and weekly activities, escalating dilemmas or role plays that focus on client-facing scenarios. So I think question 2, how do I balance, the most common question, how do I balance study alongside full-time work? For example, what does study involve and what are the attendance requirements? Well, you should be sure to set aside about 8 to 10 hours of online study per week, or hours for online study per week. The weekly conferences mentioned previously, it's not compulsory to attend, so as long as you set aside about 8 to 10 hours and wherever possible, time for those weekly conferences, you'll get through the coursework. It's why we also recommend you study 1 subject per intake. This is important as if you add an extra subject, obviously that time of 8 to 10 hours of online work per week would double, with the maximum of 3 subjects per intake, potentially taking about 30 hours of your time per week. To question 3, what subjects are available and where do I find information on this? You can find what subjects are available and when on our website, as well as important compulsory workshop dates for the intensive subjects. It's on the postgraduate page under subjects by intake, but if you'd like to, if you find any difficulty, contact us and we'll be sure to send you the link and more information. Question 4, how much does it cost and how do I pay? That's a very important question. You don't need to pay the whole course fees upfront as one large sum. You do need to pay per subject when you enroll into that subject and pay in full. It's currently $3,450 per subject, and you pay that via EFT, credit card, invoice of business or employer, and of course fee help for government assistance if you'd like to follow that path. Question 5, what's the difference between LLM applied law and the College of Law postgraduate programs versus university masters? Well, I think that is a very common question when comparing us. The postgraduate applied law programs, they're developed by practitioners for practitioners. They focus on developing technical and practical proficiency through innovative problem-based learning. So our programs in applied law, it relies on a practical learn by doing approach, the application of legal skills realistic to tasks and scenarios that practitioners encounter in practice. It gives you the confidence to assist clients now. Our programs actually facilitate flexibility as well as easy access. That's through the online delivery, regular communication with your lecturers, support by practitioners, as well as the client services team who can assist you with some admin activities as well. So a lot of support and a lot of flexible options. we do have expert faculty, flexible study periods, and of course with 4 intakes a year, you can progress as fast as you need.
Okay, well, I will now go through some of the overview of our programs. So our very first master's degree was introduced back in 2008, and that was a Master of Applied Law, Family Law. Shortly after, we've also introduced the other 2 Master of Applied Law degrees, one of them being in commercial litigation and the other one being in the wills and estates. Around that same time, the in-house practice, what back then was a graduate diploma, was also upgraded to the Master's Award. Since the initial introduction of our master's programs, the structure of the degree has changed to allow for the greater flexibility in being able to choose subjects from the various streams in order to ensure that students are able to choose the subjects that would be applicable and relevant to their career. We have also introduced more practice areas, as we'll see later on during this session. And the college now is the 3rd largest provider of the postgraduate Masters in Legal Education in Australia. We have students from all over Australia, so from various states and territories. And in terms of the years of practice, the majority of our current students have up to 5 years of post-admission experience. The second largest group of our students, they have between 5 to 10 years of post-admission experience. Okay, so in terms of why choose us, our adjunct lecturer faculty, as Stuart was saying earlier, consists of practicing solicitors and barristers. Now, we also occasionally have judges who also come in and teach in our programs. A prime example of that would be our advocacy subject, for example, where a number of times we had a retired judge who was the lecturer in that subject. Now, the subject matter experts who worked on the content development of our subjects, they are also practitioners. Each practice area has its own curriculum advisory committee, and these committees also include senior practicing solicitors, barristers, and judges as their members. And the main purpose of these advisory committees is really to provide the college with advice about the curriculum and the content of each of the subject, and they may sometimes suggest some of the practical activities that can be developed and included in our subjects. They also assist the college to ensure that the curriculum and the content reflects on the issues and matters that are of concern and priority for to the practitioners and to our students. In terms of the assessments, in our master's program, students will be expected to complete a variety of practical activities and assessments, perhaps unlike some of the more traditional LLM programs. So students will not come across research essays, and rather the nature of the assessments that they will experience, and that would obviously depend on the subject, but it might include drafting advices to the clients, preparing a memo to the senior partner, drafting initiating applications, drafting supporting affidavits, and assessments like that. As Stuart was also mentioning, the structure of our program is very flexible. Most of our subjects are offered online. There are 4 intakes a year, which enables students to plan their study around their work and family commitments. We also would like to mention as part of this session that those students who are enrolled in the wills and estates or estate planning majors may be eligible to use their studies for the purposes of becoming a STEP member. So STEP is the Global Professional Association for practitioners who specialize in family inheritance and succession planning. So in order for someone to become a full STEP member, they must satisfy the 2 years of relevant experience requirement, and they also need to satisfy the educational requirement. In terms of the educational requirement, what that means is they must complete 4 subjects from either wills and estates or estate planning major, And there are a couple of core requirements as part of those 4 subjects that they'll need to complete. Another thing that I would like to mention as part of this as well is a very exciting initiative that in 2021 we've introduced a new subject in our Family Dispute Resolution Practice Program, being FDR5 Virtual Simulated Practice. So the purpose of this subject is to, together with the FDR4 subject being the case management in the family dispute resolution capstone, to meet the requirements of the work experience in our graduate diploma of family dispute resolution practice. What that essentially means is at the end of the completion of all of the core subjects in the family dispute resolution practice program, students are able to successfully complete and graduate with that degree, and they do not need to find a separate work placement. Stuart, is there anything else that you would like to add?
You've covered it quite well, I believe, but if anyone does have any further questions, I'd love to help them about that.
Thank you. Okay, so now we've got a slide that essentially lists 11 practice areas that students are able to major. So just to provide some further background, there are 2 master's programs that we'll be talking about today. One of them is being Master of Applied Law, Family Law, and as the name would suggest, the sole focus of that master's degree is on the family law. And the second master's award is Master of Laws Applied Law, which we refer to as the LLM program. And as part of that program, students are able to enroll in any of the streams mentioned on this screen. So there are 11 in total. Students can also take up 2 elective subjects from the Master of Legal Business, which I'll let Stuart to elaborate on a bit further.
Sure, thank you, Tatiana. So the Master of Legal Business complements your LLM with subjects such as pricing and strategy, which are important, which are designed to develop your commercial acumen and legal leadership. So the LLM students can take up to 2 electives from MLB as part of their LLM, Masters in Law, so they can match the deep legal specialisation and broad business knowledge needed.
Thank you. Okay, let's have a look at the structure of the LLM program. So for the most part, in total, students would be required to successfully complete 8 subjects in order to graduate with the LLM. In terms of the study options, students can choose to enroll in a single major, double major, or no major. In terms of the single major, what that means is someone might elect to major in family law, for example, and that would say Master of Laws, Applied Law, majoring in family law on the graduation certificate. So in order to do that, a student would need to successfully complete 3 subjects in a particular major. So for the purposes of this example, family law. Also complete a capstone project in family law. And then for the 4 elective subjects, they can come from any practice areas. In terms of the 3 subjects in a given major, there are no core and elective subjects. So essentially that means any 3 subjects from that major. So the only core sort of requirement would really be the capstone. Students can also elect to double major, and what that means is, again, they'll need to complete 8 subjects in total. 4 subjects will need to come from one major, and 4 subjects will need to come in from the other major. Now, one of the 8 subjects will need to be a capstone from one of the 2 majors that the student is enrolling in. We also have an option of the no major, and what that means is students are essentially able to customize the degree to suit their needs and their career. And so what that means is students can complete 7 subjects from any practice area, and the 8th subject must be the major project. Now, we've also included family dispute resolution practice major on here separately from the 3 options here. And the reason for that is that it follows a slightly different structure. So if there is a student who would like to enroll in the LLM and have a single major in family dispute resolution practice, they will need to complete 8 subjects, as mentioned earlier. There are 5 core subjects that student would need to complete, and that 5 core subjects already includes a capstone project as part of that. And then they will need to complete the 3 subjects from any other practice area to satisfy their electives. It gets a little bit more complicated when someone would like to enroll in a double major. And the reason for that is, as mentioned earlier, there are 5 core subjects that is required to satisfy family dispute resolution practice major. So in order to satisfy the second major, someone would need to complete 4 subjects from that major. Now, again, because the capstone was completed as part of the 5 core, so the capstone does not need to be completed as part of the second major, but what that essentially means is the total number of subjects required to be completed would be 9, which is different to what we've talked about earlier, where for all of the other options, it's really 8. I would like to now move on to the structure of some of our other awards. So as mentioned before, we'll also have Master of Applied Law, Family Law. Now, I think it is one of the very common questions as to what is the main difference? What is the difference between Master of Applied Law, Family Law, and Master of Laws, Applied Law, majoring in Family Law? So one of the main differences between the 2 awards is the fact that the Master of Applied Law, Family Law, its core focus is on family law. So there is not much of the flexibility in terms of students being able to complete subjects from other practice areas. So as you can see, the structure of the award is that students must complete 5 core subjects, 5 core prescribed subjects from family law, and also 3 elective subjects, again, from the family law practice. For the LLM majoring in family law, obviously the structure is not that strict. As long as students complete any 3 subjects from family law, plus the family law capstone, and any 4 subjects from any other practice area, including family law, of course. But there is no flexibility quite like that as part of the Master of Applied Law, Family Law, because again, as the name suggests, the focus is really on family law practice area. We also have graduate certificate in applied law. In order to complete the certificate, there are 2 subjects that someone would need to successfully complete. We also have 2 graduate diplomas. So the first one that I'll talk about is the graduate diploma of applied law. So in total, someone would need to complete 4 subjects to satisfy this award. Now we have a general graduate diploma, which would mean that it's any 4 subjects, again, from any of our practice areas, or there are some graduate diplomas in particular practice areas, in which case there would be a prescribed number of the core subjects that students would need to complete. Again, we've got the graduate diploma of family dispute resolution practice, which is mentioned on its own. The structure of that award is somewhat similar to the major as part of the LLM. So in order to graduate with this award, students must successfully complete the 5 core subjects. Again, as mentioned earlier, because we have introduced the FDR5 subject, being the virtual simulated practice, it does mean that at the end of the 5 core subjects, students are able to graduate with this award. Okay, so now we've got, just by way of an example, a slide that lists the subjects that may be available for enrollment in the family law major, just to give you a sense of, I guess, the variety of subjects that may be available for each practice area, which we obviously won't go through as part of this session. One thing that you may have noticed that, the very first subject is the foundations of family law practice. Every practice area has a subject which is called foundations of and the practice area. So in wills and estates, for example, it would say foundations of wills and estates practice. So the idea is that any student that is very new to the practice area, they may want to start off the enrollment by enrolling in the foundation subject. Okay, and if we can move on to the next slide, and I think I'll turn it over to you, Stuart.
Great. Thanks again, Tatiana. So wills and estates, as Tatiana mentioned earlier, is an accrued education partner with STEP. So wills and estates is one of the most popular programs as part of our applied law. It's a growing area as Australia's population ages and is noted for complexity as it sits as an intersection between several areas, including succession law, wills, taxation, property law, and commercial and family law. Thank you, Tatiana. So wills and estates is one of the most popular programs. It's a growing area in law as Australia's population ages. It's noted for its complexity as it sits at the intersection of several areas, including succession law, wills, taxation, property law, commercial, and family law. So here, one of our graduates, Adeline Shirali, went from an employee to an accredited specialist and a consulting principal in Key Point Law, an award-winning firm. So our program is also popular for its close ties to STEP, which you can see on the screen. Graduates can gain a pathway to STEP. So 4 subjects would equal to, within the wills and estates practice area, and estate planning practice area, would count as 120 diploma level credits, which could enter you as a full member, potentially, as STEP. You get a post-nom of TEP as well. So that's quite professional as well. It's a great organization. And you may want to join as a student member once you do the first subject. Or once you're enrolled in the first subject, you could even join as a student member and wet your toes before full membership into STEP later on. So our ASEAN 6 cross-border legal practice specialisation, that allows you to match your expertise in Australian law with the sophisticated understanding of cross-border transactions and legal practice, with a focus on the Asian region. Halen Pong, as you can see on the screen, Diligent Corporation's Asia Pacific Legal Counsel, is one of the students in the program. She notes the opportunity and potential of broadening your cultural and legal knowledge to the wider Asian region. Students also gain free access to the Inter-Pacific Bar Association, 1,500 members, and a frequent source of referrals for members. If you complete the arbitration practice, you can also obtain member status into the prestigious Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, with over 16,000 plus members globally. The Master of Legal Business was purpose-built to help you master strategy, pricing, and legal operations. It was developed in response to a need for legal leaders and lawyers to be T-shaped, with a deep specialist knowledge of their practice areas matched with sharp commercial acumen, business development and client relationship management, strategy, and pricing skills. In other words, the skills that would help a lawyer succeed and prosper in a shifting and competitive market. And now I'd like to hand it back to Tatiana.
Thank you, Stuart. All right, so what we'll do next is discuss the subject structure now that we have talked about the structure of the award. So each of our online subject goes for 12 weeks. And what the students will be expected to do in those 12 weeks, they will need to cover 9 modules in each subject. And each module follows a somewhat similar pattern each week. So there are certain readings that students will be required to review, and usually our readings are divided in essential readings. So there is an expectation that the students would read all of the essential readings. And in some modules, you might come across additional resources. So those readings are not required for you to review and read each week. But if a topic is of interest to you and you would like to get some more information about it, you're obviously provided some resources to have a look at. Then starting from week 2, there is a weekly interaction with the lecturer and the fellow students. And the purpose of the weekly interaction is to discuss the week's content with the lecturer, look at some escalating dilemmas, fact scenarios, raise any questions, and interact with the other students in the subject. The interactions are conducted by way of the web conference. Now, in some of our modules, there may be an activity that students are required to complete. So in total, there are 4 module activities, each worth 5% of the final grade. And I think that's a good segue into the assessments topic. So as I mentioned, there are 4 activities during the subject that students are required to complete. There is another short activity that students do at the very end of the subject, being the reflection activity, and it is worth 10%. So together, the reflection activity with the other 4 short writing activities are worth 30% of the final grade. The other 2 assessments in majority of our subjects are the written assessment and the oral assessment. So in terms of the written assessment, usually what you will expect in each subject is that you'll be provided with a fact scenario and you'll be requested to do 1 or more drafting tasks in relation to that fact scenario. So in terms of what that might look like, for example, in a family provision subject in our Wills and Estates program, students are provided the fact scenario and they're asked to draft several documents. So first document would be a position paper. And as part of that position paper, students would be expected to include the summary of what the client needs to prove in their case, advices to the client's position, and a short statement of the possible settlement outcomes. And that position paper would also need to be submitted together with a memo to the partner for the purposes of the assessment. Another example in our family law practice area in FLP2 property maintenance and child support subject, again, students are provided a fact scenario and they're asked to draft a balance sheet, appropriate orders, and a letter of advice to their client. With the oral assessment, so it is done in 2 parts. So in week, I believe 7 of the subject, students are required to prepare a presentation on a particular topic and also record a short video of them presenting on that topic. The lecturers then review the assessment and they provide their feedback to the students, and they will ask some of the follow-up questions. So the second part of the oral assessment is then for students to take, to review the feedback from the lecturer and answer the questions that the lecturers have asked of them. And as I mentioned, the last activity is a reflection activity, which is part of the short activities for the subject. So there are quite a few assessments that students get through, but again, as mentioned earlier, they all have a practical aspect to them. Now, so all of that is really relevant to the online offering of the subjects. Some of our subjects are offered on an intensive basis. What that means is, as the name would suggest, that they are being very intensive in terms of what happens during that time. So the subject would run for 6 weeks instead of 12, but all of the content that normally would be covered in 12 weeks would be covered within the 6 weeks. In terms of the assessment structure in those subjects, it is largely the same as mentioned earlier, with some variations depending on the actual subject. As Stuart, I guess, mentioned already earlier, our expectation would be that students would need to spend about 8 to 10 hours per week per subject. Now, it might be more in some weeks if there are assessments due. It might be less in other weeks where there may not be assessments due, but roughly it is between 8 to 10 hours a week. Okay, so in terms of the delivery, all of our subjects content is available in our learning management system, Canvas. What that means is that you will be able to access the subject's materials from anywhere. And that also means that you don't need to purchase any of the textbooks, as all of the materials are provided to you for the subject. There are weekly interactions, as mentioned earlier, which are conducted by a web conference. And there are also discussion boards available for students to interact with their fellow students and discuss any aspects of a particular topic as well. Lecturers communicate with the students via either an announcement. So in Canvas, a lecturer will post a subject announcement where they might set the tone for the week, provide some advice as to what the students should be focusing on during the week, provide any reminders about any upcoming assessments or any information that is relevant. Or the lecturers might also use Canvas email to communicate with the students individually if required. And obviously the same goes for the students. If they need to communicate with their lecturer, they're able to send them private messages in Canvas email. Okay, I'll now move on to the recognition of prior learning, because I believe that's also one of the frequent questions that students ask when they consider enrollment in our program. So there are a number of credit provisions available for the recognition of prior learning. So there are generally two types of credit available. The credit is either granted by way of specified credit or unspecified credit. In terms of the specified credit, what that means is a credit will be provided for a particular subject. So for example, you can see here that we've got national accredited mediators. So if a student is a national accredited mediator and they apply for the recognition of prior learning on the basis of their accreditation, they may be granted specified credit for the subject DRP4 mediation. Unspecified credit is not attached to any particular subject, and essentially what that does is it reduces the amount of subjects someone needs to complete. So for example, if you've completed PLT program at the College of Law within the last 10 years, you may be able to receive 2 subjects unspecified credit. And what that will mean in practical terms is instead of completing 8 subjects, you will need to complete 6. If you have completed PLT program at another provider, you may be able to receive 1 subject unspecified credit, again, if the PLT program was completed within the last 10 years. There is some credit available for the graduate diploma of family dispute resolution practice. Now, the amount of credit that we can grant would depend on whether the qualification was completed at the college or at another provider, and whether the applicant is currently accredited FDRP or not. We also provide credit for the college's LPMC course, so legal practice management course, by way of a specified credit for one of our subjects. And obviously, you know, if you've done some postgraduate studies in law, you can always submit your academic transcript and subject outlines of what you have done, and we will be able to consider your application on a case-by-case basis. All right, so in terms of when someone can start in our program, so we've got on this slide the next intake commencement date, which is 17th of May. As we talked about, there are 4 intakes a year. So if for whatever reason you're not able to start in intake 2, you're still able to commence your studies in August or in November this year. On our website, you will also be able to locate a list of our subjects per intake in order to help you identify what subjects are offered when, and to help you plan, I guess, your study for the next little while. Okay, I might turn it back over to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Tatiana. Absolutely, and if anyone does have any information on what was discussed previously, a great way to discuss that with me is through a scheduled chat. That way I can call you at a time that suits you. Otherwise, of course, you can send us an email or send a website inquiry as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. You can book a 15-minute phone chat with me though, as often we can cover a lot of ground, and then I can send you a backup email with all that in writing. So very happy to do that. And so if you do have any questions, please get in touch. But if you think you're ready, get started on an enrolment application. There's no too early. Enrollments for intake 2 and 3 are already open. So feel free to get started on an enrolment application. Of course, you could leave the payment for later if you need to. But get started on an enrolment application, or get in touch if you have any questions.
And we've got our contact information on this slide. And once again, thank you for joining us as part of this information session.